On Tech News Today, here comes our special episode on the right to be forgotten, a show you won't soon forget. Stick around. Tech News Today is next.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today, recorded Monday, December 8th, 2014, for December 24th. Tech News Today is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace recently launched the latest version of their platform, Squarespace 7, which has a completely redesigned interface, integrations with Getty Images and Google Apps, new templates, and an incredible feature called Cover Pages. Try the new Squarespace at squarespace.com and enter the offer code TNT at checkout to get 10% off. And by Personal Capital. With Personal Capital, you'll have many more happy holidays as you grow and protect your wealth with this award-winning financial app. Best of all, it's free. To sign up, go to personalcapital.com/TNT. Tech News Today is the show where we talk about the tech news with the journalists who reported. Welcome to the show. I'm Mike Elgan, and behind the controls is one Jason Cleanthes. How you doing, Jason?
Good, Mike. How you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. I feel really great because I love this topic. It's super controversial. There's a lot of information behind it, and I really want to get right into it. Today, we're talking about Europe's right to be forgotten rules. When internet search results unfairly stigmatize an EU citizen with obsolete or misleading information, EU rules empower that person to petition the search engine companies to have links to the stigmatizing information removed from future search results. Google, Microsoft, Yahoo, and other search engine companies are required to comply. Joining us to discuss this incredibly divisive and complex story is Jeff Jarvis, professor of journalism at the City University of New York, author of Public Parts, and of course, host of Twit's This Week in Google. How you doing, Jeff?
Hey there, Mike. Good to see you at an odd time.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you on the show, especially on this topic. I know you're very passionate about it. And we also have Luciano Floridi, who is professor of philosophy and ethics of information at the University of Oxford and the author of The Fourth Revolution. Welcome to you, Luciano.
Hi, Mike.
Very briefly, what is the Fourth Revolution about?
Well, it's the idea that we went through three revolutions before. Copernicus, we're no longer at the center of the universe. Then we retreated. We thought we were at the center of the biological kingdom, but came Darwin and said, well, sorry, guys, but you're not. Then we thought we were at the center of the mental life. And then Freud came and said, well, there's more to be said about that, too. So the point that I stress in the book is that we are undergoing a kind of fourth revolution with Alan Turing, saying that when it comes to smart technologies, we're not the only ones who can park a good car somewhere. We're not the only ones who can land an airplane. We're not the only ones who can talk to a bank. So the space of rational, smart actions is also occupied by other agents, not only us. So it's kind of a way of rethinking who we are and what we can be in the 21st century.
It sounds fantastic. So let's start off with you, Luciano. So what is the right to be forgotten concept? Now, I'm not talking about the EU rules, but just the idea of the right to be forgotten. What is that?
Well, strictly speaking, it really is the right to make sure that some memories that belong to the past either stay in the past or are completely erased. So this, I'm not talking about the Google case, I'm not talking about the European Court of Justice ruling, but generally speaking, the idea that contrary to what happened in the past, because of the digital technologies, we are actually able to make sure that the past remains in the past and we don't have to regurgitate past memories all the time. Now, this comes with a variety of difficult issues, as you said a moment ago. So it's plenty of room for philosophical debates.
And that's why we have you here. So let's talk about Europe. Now, Europe has very quickly, I think, this year emerged as, very much in the forefront of adding this concept, building this concept into law in terms of its rules for what search engines have to do. And it's kind of a curious thing. We'll get into the details about why it's so curious. But basically, can you give us a quick summary of how these rules came into to be enforced in Europe?
Well, yes. I mean, basically, many years ago, in Spain, a gentleman had some properties repossessed. It was a legal case. The court ordered the repossession to be advertised in order to have a public auction. many years later, the Google search kept showing precisely that episode again and again. The gentleman in question complained. The complaint went all the way up to the local courts, and then in Spain, and then all the way up to the European Court of Justice. Basically, the point was that he did not want to see that information being constantly reproduced by the search engine. The European Court of Justice decided that he was right. That basically the particular piece of information was no longer of public interest or sufficiently relevant to guarantee the presence in a search engine finding. So ordered Google to de-link, to remove the link to that information. Mind that this is different from what we said a moment ago, which is the information is still available online. You can find it if you want. What is no longer available is the link to the information. So that's why we also talk about de-linking particular items that are still available because they are legal content on the internet.
Now, Jeff Jarvis, as you well know, the internet can be very unforgiving to people who have gone through something. It expands certain stories about a person and de-emphasizes other things. For example, if somebody's involved in a scandal at some point, and then they go on to live a productive and scandal-free life for several years, a search for that person's name will bring up the scandal every time because it got a lot more coverage. That's just the nature of how search engines work. What's wrong with rules that require search engines to remove stigmatizing links when people search for their name?
I think we've got to deal, Mike, at a level of larger principle here. And my problem with the right to be forgotten is that it tramples the right to remember. It often tramples the right to free speech and a free press, as we've already seen in the execution of this in the EU. And as I've said, that I think we have to look at the idea that sorry, my phone just rang. We have to worry about legislating to technologies as opposed to legislating to principles. And the problem here is that I think Europe, of all places, would be sensitive about the idea of trying to rewrite history, trying to erase knowledge, trying to say what you're not allowed to know. And the way to talk about this, I think, is to take the technology out of it, even though, of course, and absolutely, the technology has an impact. It spreads knowledge wider and faster and more permanently, and those are issues, and I understand that. But, Mike, if I tell you something, my control of that knowledge is now out of my hands. It is in your hands. In my book, Public Parts, I argued that the privacy is an ethic of knowing someone else's information. Because once I've told you something, it's up to you what you do with that. I've lost control of it. And I cannot tell you that you must legally forget what I've told you. It's an impossibility. We're not in Men in Black. I can't put a pen to your head and make you forget everything you've just heard. So we have to look at this at the level of, I think, knowledge in society. So I understand why this idea of the right to be forgotten is emotionally and politically appealing, but I think we've not discussed the larger implications. And so one last point. What we've already seen in the EU is that Google brought together a commission of people to try to figure out how to do this the right way. They took down links, some good proportion of the links that are asked for. They also let people like newspapers know what links were being taken down, which only enraged the EU because obviously the newspaper would object and saying, why are you taking down our links? Why are you taking down this? Didn't we have any right of appeal? What's the situation? And then further, we now have EU politicians in the last month or so who have argued that we have to, that Google must take down these links not just at EU domains, but at Google around the world. Well, that sets a truly frightening precedent because what if the tyrants of China and Iran and other countries say, well, we also demand that you edit all the links on the internet and not just at .cn, but all around the world. We end up with the lowest common denominator of freedom and the highest common denominator of regulation, and that is the fear of what has been done here. It's a short-term view of, oh no, a techno-panic view. Oh no, there's a new technology. We have to regulate that technology, when what we should be talking about is the principle of knowledge.
Luciano, Jeff brought up the two aspects where the details of the enforcing this rule have really created a lot of controversy. Essentially, if you're going to be serious about protecting people's privacy, you have to make sure that there's no way for the search engines to get around it. So in the case of the ban or the sort of the gag order on Google and other search engines from conveying the information about the sites that have been affected by the removal of links, essentially that allows them to get around it, because in some cases, some of the publications that have been affected have essentially republished certain stories so that they would be re-indexed and therefore would appear more prominently in search results. So that's one way that they've gotten around these rules. The other way, as Jeff mentioned, which is I believe at the discussion stage at this point, but it's looking pretty likely, because the French woman who's in charge of the privacy regulation in France is also in charge of the European Union. Her name escapes me for the moment. But so that's another way that people can get around it. Europeans can just go to google.com and get the theoretically, currently, get the unaffected search results, and that's a way that Google can get around these rulings. But that's kind of an awful precedent, as Jeff mentioned. Why do the EU regulators believe that European censorship of these links is okay, whereas Chinese censorship of information about the Dalai Lama or Turkish censorship about the talk about the Armenian genocide, those sorts of things, do they think that Europe is special, or have they just not considered the precedent?
Well, I think that we all think we are special everywhere, but I agree with you that in this case, I think Europeans are being a touch unreasonable, and I speak of Europeans as continental Europe. The view that basically a ruling from a court in Europe might determine what happens throughout the world, anywhere, at any time, it doesn't seem to be either feasible or credible. I mean, it's certainly not in terms of tolerance. So I'm, as a member of the Google Advisory Council on this, I've been quite much against the view that it should be applied universally. In fact, to the extent that I've argued about precisely the opposite direction, that if anything should be done at the national level. Let me remind you one thing that Google itself made quite clear throughout the hearings we had in Europe when discussing this issue. Most people stay with the search engine that they find in their own domain. So Spanish users will use Google Spain. German users will use the German version of Google. Remember that Europe is a place of so many different languages. So what Google defines as the power of default is enormous. We're talking about 95% of users always staying with the same version of the search engine locally, which means that it makes much more sense to go in the opposite direction. Not a pan-European, let alone a world ban on a particular link, but a local ban. If something is not right in Las Vegas, it should definitely stay in Las Vegas. So something wrong in Spain, I mean, users not interested in Mr. Coseja dealings, what will be other Spanish people? Do you see people running through all possible search engines to find out about his profile and so on? To be honest, the simple answer is, who cares? So if local people care, well, block at least only the local links. That will be a more reasonable, seems to me, approach, and something that goes a little bit towards mitigating what Jeff said, which I completely agree with. We need to be careful about infringing the right to be informed. Sometimes the information that are available online, they can be very harmful. I mean, I've been exposed to cases where lives have been ruined just because that piece of information kept coming back again and again and again. A school teacher, someone who had his driving license suspended for drink drive 20 years ago, now with completely different jobs, but he lost the job because of that, etc. So we need to be careful. We're talking about real human lives here, not just general principles that should be applied universally at all cost. I don't like at all cost. But I do think that costs could be reduced, and especially when it comes to the protection of the flow of information. And one way of doing that is to stay national, stay local. You don't like those particular bits of information, remove that link in that particular context. Now, the fact that now recently Europe or some Europeans have taken the political flag of this particular fight and use it as a cheap, easy way of winning consent on the European side against the digital giants and so on, so that basically they can occupy the high ground and the righteous position and saying, well, look, Europe can teach the rest of the world what needs and needs not be done when it comes to information online. I find it completely in disagreement with. I could not be more distant from it. At the same time, we should realize that these are real human lives.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I'd like to go back to that point that you make about the impact on lives, because I think you're right that is quite important. And I've been trying to think this through lately about the idea that the solution is not, in the long run, cannot be to try to erase information and control information. I think that's a dangerous thing. I'm a journalist. I'm an American and thus a bit of a First Amendment fetishist. But even that aside, my argument of late has been an ethical argument that we, the users of the net, have to do a few things. One is that to encourage civility, we have to stop encouraging incivility. And so when you get to the behaviors of, let's say, trolls and hate mongers and bad people, too often online I see people saying, hey, fight, that's lulz, that's funny, and it's sending people there. And the responsibility is not just on platforms to do things, it's more on members of society to stop giving trolls the attention that feeds them. That's the first point. The second point is that we have to acknowledge as a society, and this is easier in America where we fetishize failure as well, that we all make mistakes. We were all young once. We all did silly things. At some point when all of our pimples can be seen around the world, don't we at some point have to become a more tolerant society, recognizing that we all live in glass houses? We have to change the norms of our society towards embarrassing moments rather than trying to erase those embarrassing moments, because I think in the long run that's a futile effort, and it's really more a commentary on our society than on our technology. As an ethical issue, I'm very eager to hear your thoughts on that.
I like the second point you made because let me put it slightly more personally. I'm delighted that my mom was unable to put my little pictures when I was young, dressed like Robin Hood online, because my students would have a hell of a good time. However, I do believe there's something that has not been said during the debate, because it cannot be said too loudly. It's politically incorrect, which is a generational problem as well. I mean, we're facing old people regulating a technology which was born when they were already mature individuals, and old people tend to be conservative. It's hard to digest, but the truth is that probably at the moment, the guy on the other side of the desk that is evaluating the application for a job of a 20 years old and finds those pictures, those texts online, is going to judge them very differently as when that 20 years old will be on the other side of the desk, and he will be the one who also has those pictures online, also has the funny avatar somewhere, etc., and will say, you know what, no big deal. Honestly, no big deal. And I think that is also a generational issue. Having said all this, I am also surprised that the whole issue has been transformed into a search engine problem, when in fact is the information at the source. Let me clarify this point for a moment. If the information is so dangerous, is so hurtful, so improper, why blocking the search engine? Why not blocking the information in the first place? Right. I mean, we do have rules about this. It's child pornography. We don't go after the search engine. We go after the child pornographer. We go after the source. You just don't simply say, now imagine child pornography. You know what? Or just make sure that the pictures are not searchable. Of course not. We want to remove the pictures. We want to block access to that website, etc. So I don't understand here the hypocritical approach. Say, on the one hand, you want to say, oh, this is very harmful, touches real human lives, one line, but let's remove only the links, not the real stuff there. Well, that's not really straightforward. It's only half game, and I find it very unsatisfactory. If we're serious about removing that information, then I would like to go all the way down to remove the actual information, access to it, robots.txt, some kind of solution, or ask the publisher to remove it. Because if it is so harmful, so dangerous, that it has to infringe the right to access, better be not there in the first place. I find
we do have laws. We do have laws to that effect, right?
Exactly. We do, and we can improve them. We can refine them.
It doesn't matter. We have libel laws.
Precisely.
Right.
And I'm only in favor of revising them.
I just want to know.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I just bought your book, sir.
The best you can do.
There it is. There it is. Because I do find this your premise is fascinating to me of these seismic shifts in our cognition of the world, and anybody who watches Twig, the show I'm on, knows that I have a drinking game whenever I mention Gutenberg. But Elizabeth Eisenstein, the key scholar of Gutenberg, says it took 100 years for the book's impact on society to be fully realized.
Yeah, exactly.
The seismic shifts you write about are gigantic and millennial. We're at an early stage here in rethinking our norms around this and renegotiating those norms. What's your sense of the timetable of this process?
Well, I think it's going to be faster, but not as fast as we have the impression now. If I can make a comment briefly on the point you referred just a moment ago, I was this removing links is like taking an aspirin or a painkiller. If the damage we're talking about is so serious, you better go to the dentist. So that's why I'm not convinced. But in terms of a pace of change, how fast things are changing under our eyes, I think we are witnessing a sort of a schizophrenic kind of society now, which hasn't been there before. And trust me, philosophy is an old discipline. We've been around for a while. But the point is that in the past, technological changes were happening at a pace that generations could absorb more easily. Normally, you can tell that a technology is disruptive is when the parents are taught by the children how to use it. So my dad taught me how to drive, but I taught him how to use an iPhone. And that's the problem. Now, I think we're going to see an increase in that pace so that new technologies are going to be faster and faster coming to change our environment, to change the way we think we can interact with each other. We think we are a certain kind of agents, subjects. Meanwhile, we're the same biological species. We have the same brain. We live longer, which is a problem because the generational turnout is even more slow. So I would think that this sort of reaction that we see in this sort of nutshell, this European Court of Justice, going against the general advisor recommendation, which said, don't do it. And you know what? Normally the court follows the general advisor's suggestion, but not in this case. Well, old people will be even less willing to follow the new waves than we can find now. So the generational gap is going to increase. It's, in a way, good to know that wisdom will be sort of counterbalanced by genius, as they say these days. But I'm not so much sure that genius will be having an easy life in the following decades to come.
Luciano, I want to stop you there because we're going to take a break because I want to tell you about Squarespace, one of our sponsors today. Squarespace is a fantastic place to build a website, to build a blog, any sort of website. If you want to sell something online, Squarespace is the place to do it. And if you're a developer, of course, it's really easy to use. Everybody knows Squarespace is incredibly easy to use. But if you're a developer, it's incredibly powerful. The developer platform just got out of beta. Now you can customize your site exactly as you wish if you know how to code. If you're a developer, you'll have access to the same platform that Squarespace itself uses for its own site for complete code control. And of course, e-commerce is available at all subscription plan levels, including the ability to accept donations, which of course is great for cash wedding registries, nonprofits, school fund drives, whatever it is. And of course, if you're selling things, you're going to want that e-commerce as well. Super, super powerful. So start a free 2-week trial with no credit card required and start building your website. When you decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure you use the offer code TNT to get 10% off and to show your support for Tech News Today. And to begin using Squarespace 7, existing customers can go to the Settings tab to activate all the new features. And we thank Squarespace for their support of Tech News Today. Squarespace, start here, go anywhere. Okay, so speaking of the future, Jeff Jarvis, I want to ask you a question. I mean, we think of search engines as these sort of algorithmically based machines that bring back all of the links but prioritize according to order whenever you ask it a question or search for a set of keywords. But search engines, those very indexes, are becoming something else in the wearable era, and with the Google knowledge base, they're essentially becoming answer machines. So if I go to Siri, for example, or if I go to Google Now or Cortana on a Windows Phone device, I ask a question and it doesn't give me 300,000 possible answers. It gives me the answer. So in the age of sort of search engines as answer machines rather than search result machines, isn't the right to be forgotten more important? Because if you ask a question about who somebody is and you just get that one answer about some 2-decade-old scandal, that's really not only unfair to the person, but it's just completely inaccurate. So do we have to rethink this whole? Do we have to rethink our opposition to the right to be forgotten, given the fact that we're entering into this answer machine age?
That's a really interesting point, Mike, and I take it well and seriously. But I think you also raise some other issues at the same time. One is that search engines are no longer monolithic. They are personalized. They are relevant to you as an individual and your context and your behavior and use and interests and what you know and don't know and so on and so forth. So the idea that when you cut something out of a search engine or change that answer of the search engine, you're changing it for everybody is irrelevant. The second major trend we have going on is that people are coming to content, thus information, less and less from search engines proportionally, though search engines aren't shrinking, but proportionally, obviously, social is becoming more important. So at some point, let's say that you do erase something from the search engine, but that everybody is still saying that Kim Kardashian has a big rear end, and she doesn't like that. I doubt she would dislike that, but let's just imagine that as an example. And she gets it cut out of Google, or she gets it cut out of the definition for her, but doesn't matter because society is spreading that. So if you look at companies like Reputation.com, which I think are somewhat exploitive of a fear that's out there, but their tactic for dealing with this is to flood the zone with new information, better information. So what you're really asking then is a quality question, is an authority and trust question. Right now, Google trusts our links, right? PageRank is built upon that the actions of the whole will drive you to more reliable information. But PageRank isn't the only way that Google does that anymore. We've had Matt Cutts from Google on Twig often, and he talks about trying to find better signals of authority and originality. And Google's constantly trying to do that. I was at a session called Newsgeist where we sat down with Google talking about, and Richard Gingras from Google News, talking about ways that news organizations, for one, could have better signals of authority and originality and source reporting and credibility and so on and so forth. And so these things they're not easy. They're not simple structures of saying that's a right answer or a wrong answer. There's no such thing in a lot of the questions you're going to ask. If you go to Google and start searching Jeff Jarvis one of those responses is probably going to be a-hole. And you can believe that or not believe that. That's a qualitative judgment. It's not a binary decision. So it's not as simple as saying, so I think you're quite right, that if you get one answer to a question and that answer is wrong or harmful or difficult, Jeff Jarvis is a thief when I'm not a thief and have never been accused or found guilty of being a thief, yeah, that's a problem we got to figure out a way to deal with. But that doesn't mean that you try to kill the flea with the cannon. The problem here is that if we try to come up with a system where we can just erase all kinds of information because somebody simply doesn't like it, we're going to take real information that matters away. I think Luciano had exactly the right point before. And again, I would say extract the technology from this discussion. We already have laws against child pornography, against defamation, libel, and so on. Those are the laws that you need to enforce at the source. But to criminalize links to things becomes a problem. It's the same problem we see in Spain right now, where they're going to tax the links, where the publishers are going after the right to link. A link is speech. And again, I'm an American First Amendment fetishist, but I think we've got to work very hard to protect that speech and not presume that we can clean up the world. Finally, I think part of this problem is a media perspective. We in media produce, properties in print, and we think that we've copyrighted it and we've gotten it all right, unless you're Rolling Stone, and it's possible to be fully right about something. Well, as the Rolling Stone incident and others more every day prove, you can't be. News doesn't have a beginning and an end. Information doesn't have a beginning and an end. Information is a changeable protean beast. And so I think it's difficult for us to have this technological presumption that we can turn information into a binary of right and wrong. I don't think we can.
Yep.
Okay,
can
just a sec. If I can just interject for just a second, we're going to take a quick break and hear from our other sponsor. And when we come back, we're going to wrap this up in just a second. But first, I want to tell you about one of our sponsors, Personal Capital. You're going to make a New Year's resolution. Why not get your finances in order with Personal Capital? They bring together all of your different bank accounts and 401ks and retirement, all that stuff, puts it all in one place where you can look at financial graphs, intuitive charts, and see exactly what's happening with your money. Personal Capital should be on your to-do list for 2015. It's already helping more than 600,000 investors just like you manage and grow your wealth. It's your money. Why don't you hang on to more of your money and lose less of your money? Personal Capital is a complete, intuitive financial dashboard for you to get all your accounts in one place so you can make smarter financial decisions and manage your portfolio like a pro. You can also get tailored advice for optimizing your investment, and that advice is golden. We all need help and advice from professionals, and Personal Capital is going to help you along your way and basically grow your money, which is exactly what you want to do with your money. To set up a free account, go to personalcapital.com/TNT. And Personal Capital is free, and it's the smart way to grow your money. And we thank Personal Capital for their support of Tech News Today. Okay, Luciano, very quickly, Jeff raised something, and then I know you had a point to make, but Jeff raised an issue, and I want to ask you this question very briefly. Do you consider search engine results speech?
If the answer has to be yes or no and cannot be qualified in other way, I would say yes. I'd rather go for it's more complicated. But if we have to choose for yes or no, I'd rather go for yes. The trouble is that, for example, at the same time, search engines don't want to be considered at the same level as journalists. They don't want to be ruled by the same kind of code of ethics, which says something about the yes answer. If you were free speech, you were exactly like journalism, why not adopting the same kind of ethical code, which I would welcome, by the way. The comment I wanted to make very briefly on what Jeff said is that he said something on which I totally agree, and the remark I want to make is it's about time. The discussion about this right to be forgotten and the general topic is that some people have been treating information as if it came with a best before kind of date. Oh, this is relevant now, but it becomes irrelevant after X number of years. And that is total rubbish. Something never loses relevance. May become relevant and then irrelevant, but relevant again, depending on the kind of questions that you're asking. And the temptation to regulate on free speech by adding extra layers of some kind of best before time kind of zone so that information can be forgotten because it's only 10, 15, 20 years old, I don't think so. I don't think this is a good idea, not least because, at least in Europe, we have disasters, human disasters, we cause ourselves to the rest of the world, about which we should never, ever forget. Now, for someone of my generation, it's a bit astonishing to be told that the new wave is the right to be forgotten. When we grew up, it was the duty to remember. So you can see that, it's a bit confusing all of a sudden, 20 years later, to be told that the real point is about how much you can forget rather than how much you should remember. Definitely. Ever. And that's why time should play a role only in the sense that nothing becomes irrelevant just because it's old.
Very good point, and we're going to have to end it there. This is a fascinating topic, and of course you can follow both of these gentlemen into the future as they continue to discuss this super important issue. Jeff Jarvis is at buzzmachine.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at Jeff Jarvis, and of course find him right here on the Twit Network. Thanks for joining us for this discussion, Jeff.
Thank you.
All right, and Luciano Floridi is at philosophy-of-information.net. Great URL there. And you can follow him on Twitter at Floridi. Thank you for joining us today, Luciano.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Well, you can subscribe to Tech News Today on iTunes, or you can choose your favorite way to subscribe at twit.tv/TNT. You can follow us on Twitter at Tech News Today TV. And please send us your thoughts and opinions about the right to be forgotten. Send email to tnt@twit.tv or leave voicemail at 260-TNT-SHOW. Don't miss our evening newscast, Tech News Tonight, at 4 p.m. Pacific tonight and every weeknight right here on the Twit Network. My name is Mike Elgan. Thanks for tuning in. If you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas to you, and we'll see you tomorrow.